Hey guys and girls, so today we're going to take some notes via this video lesson here. Go ahead and get out a piece of binder paper, or if you'd like to take notes on a Google Doc, you can do that as well. Title your assignment 15.4, Aggressors on the March. This is the second part of your reading on 15.4. The first part covered Japan. You should have done some notes last week on Japan. Seeks an Empire, that section titled Japan Seeks an Empire. And so just a quick overview on what you read about Japan. Essentially, Japan jumps on the imperialist wagon along with all the other industrialized European countries and decides to build an empire. You see that Japan is an island, and so they're going to be limited by the raw materials and the resources that are available to them at that island. They also have a growing population. And really their only way to get to the status of an empire is going to be to seek out and conquer other nations, right? Through the practice of imperialism. So you see Japan invade Manchuria in 1931 in China, and then you see another conflict in China in 1937 where Japan is the active aggressor, right? Japan also becomes a fascist country, a little bit different than some of these other countries. They do keep an emperor, and the emperor really actually ends up serving more of a ceremonial head of state. And what else about Japan? They also are primarily a militaristic government. So let's go ahead and take a look at Benito Mussolini in Italy. So if you remember back to our unit on imperialism, Italy attacks Ethiopia, the African country, in the late 1800s. And Ethiopia was one of the only African countries that was able to resist imperialism by Italy. And this was kind of an embarrassing defeat for Italy. So when they come this time around, they're really seeking revenge for their earlier losses. They want to build an empire. They want to reclaim their status in the world. And that's really what's behind Italy's attack on Ethiopia. Ethiopian army is no match for the Italian tanks, airplanes, poison gas, and just general modernized weaponry. Haile Selassie was the emperor of Ethiopia. He asked the League of Nations for help. The League does nothing to help. As a matter of fact, none of the Western powers do anything to help. Great Britain allows Italy to use the Suez Canal to transport materials. So they actually kind of enable Mussolini. And Selassie issues a warning. He says, "It is us today, it will be you tomorrow." So that kind of foreshadows there, right? Today it will be this African country, tomorrow he'll be coming after you in Europe. Let's take a look at Hitler. So Hitler defies the Treaty of Versailles. Remember that the Treaty of Versailles was a source of great discontent for the German people. Remember that the Germans felt deeply humiliated by the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. And remember also that in Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, that it is his goal to really kind of undo those humiliating terms of the Treaty of Versailles. So in 1935, he does just that. He announces that Germany is rebuilding their armed forces, which, remember, was specifically prohibited by the Treaty of Versailles. In 1936, German troops occupy the Rhineland. The Rhineland is this area that you can see here in kind of pink between Germany and the northern border of France. This was also a term of the Treaty of Versailles, that this area needed to be demilitarized. That means there's no military there. especially on the part of Germany, right? And so in 1936, German troops break this part of the Treaty of Versailles, and they reoccupy this area known as the Rhineland, which was supposed to serve as a buffer zone between Germany and France. It's like a safe zone, and this area being demilitarized really decreases the chances that there's going to be any future militaristic conflict between the two countries. So what happens here? France does nothing when Germany breaks this part of the Treaty of Versailles. And really nobody does anything because no one wants to start another war. And this approach became known as appeasement. Appeasement is this idea of just giving in to an aggressor's demands in order to keep the peace. So you're going to see how this policy of appeasement is used kind of over and over, and it eventually just kind of leads to Hitler going mad and wanting to take over the world. So Hitler continues to defy the Treaty of Versailles. The reoccupation of the Rhineland kind of signifies a turning point in the march towards war. We've already seen kind of Japan begin or set to the stage of war with their conflicts in China. But Germany's moves here do a few things. They strengthen Hitler's power and prestige, and they also tip the balance of power in Germany's favor. So what happens here is that France and Belgium, because Hitler has kind of broken these pieces of the treaty, specifically the reoccupation of the Rhineland, that leaves France and Belgium pretty open to attack. And the fact that no one does anything about it because of this approach or this policy of appeasement encourages Hitler to kind of speed up his expansion under nationalist or fascist rule. Okay, so next we are going to look at Hitler here. Mussolini actually is encouraged by Hitler, and he seeks to have an alliance with him. In 1936, the two dictators reach an agreement known as the Rome-Berlin Axis. It essentially is an alliance. And then soon after that, Germany also makes an agreement with Japan. Germany, Italy, and Japan become the Axis powers. This is going to be an important key term. Axis powers is what we will refer to Germany, Italy, and Japan as throughout World War II. All right, and then finally, we're going to look at Spain. So what's happening in Spain? Spain takes a much less active role in World War II, but nonetheless, they're important to talk about. So first off, some background on Spain. Spain had actually, like most other European countries, had been a monarchy, right? They had been ruled by a king and a queen up until 1931 when a republic was declared. Remember that a republic is a form of democracy. It's an indirect form of democracy in which people are to some extent, they get to participate in the political process and the decision-making process of their country. The government was run by liberals and socialists who held office in many cities amid the crisis. Similar to other countries who fell to fascism, people began to favor fascist-style government in around 1936 in Spain. And this is going to lead to a civil war in which the General Francisco Franco leads a revolt. And then finally, how does the Civil War kind of play out? Well, Hitler and Mussolini send aid to Spain. They hop on the side of Franco, of course, a fellow fascist. They hop on his side and they send aid in the form of troops, tanks, and airplanes. The armed forces, the Republicans, the Democratic forces, they received very little aid from abroad. Western democracies wanted to remain neutral. Remember, particularly the United States during World War I did not want to get dragged into any global conflicts, and they really for a long time had this isolationist kind of approach. They wanted to stay out of conflicts. The Soviet Union was the only country to send equipment and advisors. There was also a small international brigade of volunteers that fought on the Republican side, but ultimately they really didn't have the support that they needed to win. So by 1939, the Republican resistance had collapsed, and Franco became Spain's first fascist dictator. So I think that's all we have for today's notes. Please make sure that you finish those up. Email me if you have any questions, and hope that was helpful. Thanks.